Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
It is 7:07. Good morning. Thanks for tuning in to O'Connor and Company to start your day the right way. You know, if you miss any of our program, the episodes are uploaded to every single podcast platform you can even imagine. Some you can't even imagine. And each hour is set up as its own episode. So if you miss a certain hour, you don't have to scroll through all 4 hours of our show. No, just find the hour that you want and enjoy that experience. I'm not going to say it's an ad-free experience, but I will say that it's not the same ad experience you get on the radio. That's all I'll say. I like ads personally. It pays the bills. Ads are fabulous.
We have great advertisers, but the future is now, Larry.
Also, each of our great interviews are broken down as separate episodes on that podcast, so you should subscribe and download conveniently to your device. Our interviews today will include at 7:35 Congressman Rob Wittman of Virginia, at 8:05 Maryland Senator Justin Reedy, and our guest now, Jonathan Fahey, former acting director of ICE and a former federal prosecutor. It's Larry O'Connor with Cassie Smedile. Oh, by the way, thank you, Cassie, for being here. And here
Good morning, Larry.
Mr. Fahey. Good morning, John. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
There's a lot to unpack here. Let's start with Abigail Spanberger, who not only decided to set affordability aside just long enough to be able to push some pretty radical Mamdani-like proclamations through as governor during her first several days. One of them was to end cooperation with ICE at the state level and put pressure on local law enforcement to no longer cooperate with ICE. This comes to light after a murder at the hands, it appears, the suspect now who's been arrested and is in custody is a multi-offender illegal immigrant in this country. He's sort of exhibit A of what the police would do with somebody like this. They would hand them over to ICE. ICE would deport them. She has doubled down and said, nope, not going to do it, not under the current rules. Sort of reflect on that for a moment about how dangerous it may be. But also, please address this fake narrative that Spanberger and Democrats put out that, well, all you need to do is get a judicial warrant.
Yeah, that's a big lie, and I'll get to that in a second. But
okay.
It is interesting that she is, supposedly the moderate, candidate. And the scary thing is she is actually mainstream within the Democratic Party, meaning on immigration. The Democrats, I think, by and large, other than John Fetterman, fully support sanctuary cities, which keep criminals into the community. But her policy is remarkable in its extremism because her policy is more extreme than, get this, California, because California at least will turn over violent criminals to ICE to be deported from their Department of Corrections, not from their local jails. Spanberger takes it a step further, and not only does she want the local jails to not cooperate with ICE, but our Department of Corrections in Virginia won't even turn over rapists, murderers, robbers, child molesters to ICE. She'd rather put them back in the community, back into Virginia to harm our community rather than turn them over for ICE. And, there's no other way to look at this other than this is just for her own political advancement.
Well, she would say just get a judicial warrant, and then we'll go ahead and honor that, and we'll hand them over to federal law enforcement. That sounds reasonable.
Yeah, it sounds great, other than if somebody were to ask her, well, what does that mean? Because if you were to go to a judge and say, I want a warrant to deport this person, the judge would look at you like you're crazy and say, there is a statute that deals with this, and it empowers the executive branch to issue these warrants. So if you want a warrant to deport this person, you need to go to the executive branch.
Right. So the judge would say, "Sir, this is a Denny's. We don't do that sort of thing here. That's not how this works."
Yeah. So what she's doing is it's deliberately misleading because she's trying to undermine these ICE administrative warrants to suggest that they are somehow unlawful, which they've been tested in the courts and are lawful. So she's trying to do that and just trying to suggest that they're cutting a corner or something like that by not getting a judicial warrant, even though it's not an available option. The only time it would be an option would be if the person committed a separate federal crime. So, for example, this person in Virginia committing a murder. A murder is inherently a state crime, not a federal crime. So there is no vehicle. If you were to go to a judge in Fairfax County or a federal judge and say, we now want our immigration warrant again, they would look at you like
wrong
like
jurisdiction.
You have 3 heads.
Yeah.
But she should know this. That's
well, of course she does. Yeah, now she's into misinformation. She's a CIA operative. But let me ask you this, Jonathan, just a quick follow-up on this, because it gets so distorted on cable news right now, this idea of judicial warrants. You know, the Democrats, even though we're engaged in a military strike against the leading state sponsor of terror on the planet for the last 4+ decades, Iran, they still will not open up funding for the Department of Homeland Security. And this is one of the things they're trying to compel. They're trying to compel a change in the statute or a change in how ICE operates by forcing these judicial warrants. Let's just for a moment, it's not going to happen, but let's just say Republicans say, okay, we'll completely rewrite immigration law and immigration statutes to accommodate Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries so they'll finally do their job and fund DHS. There are, by some estimations, 20 million illegal immigrants or more that need to be deported. What would that look like if each and every one of them had to have a judicial warrant for deportation?
Well, it would look like,
Could they do that in 50 years even?
Yeah, you probably couldn't do that in 250 years, and at the same time, you would have to shut down the entire federal court system for everything else that they do, because they wouldn't be able to handle it. So you would essentially have to create probably 20,000 new federal judges just to handle the volume of this.
Thank you.
But we all know the real reason they don't want deportation, so they act like they're against the process.
That's what I'm getting at. Every Democrat who says they're fine with deportations just to get a judicial warrant, what they're really saying is we do not want any deportations. We do not want immigration law enforced. Okay. Thank you. Go ahead, Cassie.
Clarifying statement. Well, that was getting at my thought, too. So then what is the next option? Because I don't think this is it, but recall Tom Homan talking in his press conference in Minneapolis saying, if we don't have the cooperation of the local government to let us know when they're going to let these guys out of jail, that takes one agent. Now we got to take 15 agents to go into these neighborhoods to actually track them down, do a lot more work. Is that even an option in this case? Or without the warrant, there's no way to get this legal and send him back to from whence he came?
Yeah. What they would have to do is wait for this guy to get released from jail, maybe sit outside of the jail or sit outside of the Department of Corrections. And with our Fairfax prosecutor, it's very likely this guy walks on this charge, even though it's probably overwhelming evidence. But what ICE needs to do is put more agents in Virginia, and then Virginia will respond, or Spanberger will respond, why do we have all these ICE agents? And then they'll complain about that. It's a cynical game that they're playing. And, maybe ICE should just park, ICE vans outside of every jail and check everyone that walks out the door, because anything short of that, they're going to end up having criminals released on the streets. And Spanberger knows that. And that's what the whole thing is so cynical, because they won't be honest about their policy, which is mass amnesty and open borders, because they know that doesn't sell. So they play all of these games. And the worst thing about these games, they put agents in danger. They put you, me, and the rest of the public in danger, rather than, hey, be honest about it, have a debate, and then be willing to abide by the law if you lose the debate. That's what our system is. But instead, they play these games to our public safety detriment.
You're the former acting director of ICE. You're seeing what has recently played out in Minnesota, and now you're seeing these moves in Virginia by the governor. Ostensibly in a reaction to Minneapolis and saying, yeah, okay, we're going to follow the same policies that Tim Walz and the team over there has done. What should ICE do? This is the backyard of Washington, D.C., and anything that happens here is heightened times 10 compared to a place like Minneapolis. But at the same time, ICE has a responsibility to enforce law, and this is obviously defiant and a provocative act by Governor Spanberger. It's like she's baiting ICE and Department of Homeland Security to come right into Fairfax and start their enforcement operations. What would you do if you were the director of ICE right now?
Yeah, that's such a good point. They want a Minnesota 2.0 in Virginia. I think they need to bring more agents in. And again, I think they need to plant people outside of jails, go to courthouses, and all of these things the Democrats say they don't want, but they have to do it because there's no other option. And unfortunately, with these, at least some sheriffs will still work with ICE, but they're, the state's discouraging them from doing so. And I think at the national level, Congress needs to do something with these sanctuary cities. Like, withhold funding or things of that nature, because they're not only costing us money, they're costing us lives, and it should not be tolerated that these states like Virginia and Minnesota think that they could write their own immigration law, and coincidentally that happens to be a mass amnesty immigration law, but it can't be tolerated because that's not the way our system works. So yeah, they need more resources here, unfortunately, and it'll cost taxpayers money and probably put people in danger because it's harder to arrest people out on the streets than it is in the jail. It's just so awful what she's doing.
Get ready for chaos, brought to you by Abigail Spanberger, the moderate governor of Virginia. Thank you so much for joining us, Jonathan Fahey. Appreciate it as always.
Thank you.
Great stuff. 717. Who doesn't love the idea of an electric school bus? It makes so much sense. They're quieter. They don't spew exhaust while you're sitting there. Does that ever happen to you when you're sitting behind a school bus at a red light and then it starts and then you get that whole cloud of exhaust coming at you? And Lord knows school buses destroy the planet. They've taught me that.
Why should kids even have to go to school then?
That's true.
Can't even get them there without destroying the planet.
The solution was to get an electric school bus, and
sure, of course.
And Montgomery County Public Schools have gone overboard, converting as many of their school buses as possible to electric. They all had parties, they all had demonstrations. They got a lot of federal money from Biden's, so-called Inflation Reduction Act, which was really just the Green New Deal, and propped up a bunch of these programs. And Montgomery County, of course, all the virtue. They can power these school buses merely on the energy of their own self-satisfaction and virtue that they personally generated over having these electric school buses. But here's the problem. That's all that generated the electric school buses, because apparently the people in Montgomery County who made all of these decisions and got all of the kudos for saving the planet, because Lord knows the planet's temperature is reliant on the kinds of buses that are taking kids to school in Montgomery County, Maryland. They had a problem over the course of the last several weeks because apparently those electric school buses don't operate well in freezing temperatures. And no one in Montgomery County leadership recognized that sometimes we have winter here.
Just another excuse to cancel school, parents. That's how you should message this.
Yeah, exactly. More school, more school days, or more snow days. It has been an absolute disaster. So much so that guess what? They have a solution. Spend more of your money. They are now putting out a contract for 100 brand new diesel buses because the electric ones do not meet the requirements for use. So that will be 100 new diesel buses that, of course, will ruin the planet, but now nobody cares about that.
Wait a minute. What did they have before the electric buses?
Diesel buses. Yes, exactly. They bought in 2021. They bought 326 electric buses. They said it was a step toward eventually replacing the entire fleet with electric vehicles. But the purchase with Highlight Electric Fleets was affected by months-long delivery delays, maintenance issues. They don't meet the standards that they were supposed to meet. They don't perform the way they're supposed to perform. And we've already seen up in colder regions north of us where they've done this, where the buses will not even start or operate or function properly because of freezing temperatures. So now they're dipping back into the budget and they're buying an additional 100 diesel buses, which they could have bought 5 years ago.
Or just kept what they had 5 years ago. Right. But then they wouldn't have gotten to line the pockets of their buddies who were all in on the electric bus business.
Well, there's that too. Yeah. The problem is the county has a goal. They voted on it. They want to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 80% in 2027 and 100% in 2035. And to meet that goal, the school district has to stop purchasing non-electric buses. So now they're buying non-electric buses. What are they going to do?
It is really, I'm laughing, but this is going to come to Virginia next. Abigail Spanberger is definitely going to do this too.
To be on the left, you must box yourself into this corner. My favorite quote in this entire article now, explaining that they're going to go back to diesel buses, was hang on. Are you ready? When they talk about their primary responsibility, our primary focus, according to Liliana Lopez, spokesperson for the district, our primary focus is ensuring safe, timely, and reliable transportation for the more than 103,000 students we serve daily. Is it? Is that your because if that was your primary responsibility, you wouldn't have bought the electric buses in the first place.
Yes, because you knew this was going to happen. And I was seeing the story in Michigan where they also tried this, and they were abandoning the buses on the side of the road.
Yeah.
Because the company that they contracted to do the buses went bankrupt, so they couldn't fix the buses.
Yes.
And so they also went back to diesel.
When they made this announcement in 2021, and they said they were saving the planet and they were buying electric buses, there were certain voices that said, okay, these things are not going to be able to do long-haul field trips. These things are not going to be reliable. They're not going to perform well in winter months. They're not going to be able to give you the midday services that you needed after the morning routes because you can't recharge fast enough because it takes too long to recharge the battery. So now these are all of the problems they're seeing right now. But at the time, when those of us made those claims, we were screamed at and told that we were killing baby seals.
Right. We were the polluters. And that's the thing, Larry. I'm not you drive an electric vehicle.
I drive a Tesla. It's fine for me.
I'm not holistically opposed to the concept of electric vehicles, but talk about putting the cart before the horse. This wholesale mandate that you have to overhaul the fleet before you've tested it, before the technology has caught up with the need. It's wild to me. And again, and I know the Free Beacon has written about this. There was a lot about this of the why, follow the money, who actually was enriched by this.
That's
clearly
right.
and at what cost to getting children safely and reliably to school.
Yeah. Hold on. You just said cart before the horse. Maybe you're onto something. Maybe we just get some horses and some carts and get the kids to school
go back to horse
that way.
and buggy.
Now you're talking.
The Amish were onto something.
Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
7:37 now on O'Connor and Company. Thanks for tuning in here on a busy Wednesday morning as we continue to analyze the results of the Texas primaries in particular, as well as the latest news that we get out of the epic fury strikes against Iran. In fact, we are now getting word that the head of the Republican of the Special Forces, the IRGC, he has been neutralized, eliminated by a military strike. That's the word we're getting, and the president has been informed of that. This according to, I believe it was Axios reporting that. We'll give you more details on that development coming up a little later this morning. Also at 8:05, we'll speak with Maryland Senator Justin Reedy. I am Larry O'Connor. Cassie Smedile, professional communicator in the political world, joins us. Is that a good title? Do you want that? Comms expert? Uh-oh. She's a comms expert, but she didn't turn her microphone on.
I was literally saying only after coffee, which I clearly need to get more of.
All right, Cassie Smedile, formerly of
morning, Larry.
Capitol Hill in the RNC, and lots of very smart politicians have Cassie Smedile in orbit, including our next guest, Representative Rob Wittman. I'm not saying that he has had Cassie Smedile in orbit, but I know that Rob Wittman is a smart politician and a very good congressman. That's why they want to get rid of your district, Congressman Wittman.
Larry, it's unbelievable what they're trying to do there in Virginia. And good morning, Cassie. Thanks for all you've done through the years. Great work, great communicator. So we are all glad to have you there with Larry this morning. But yes, back in Virginia, unbelievable, Larry, what they're doing. I mean, this is a pure partisan power grab from a state that has 6 Democrat, 5 Republicans now wanting to go to 10-1.
Yeah,
it's just unbelievable, a complete overreach. But that's the way the Democrats there in Virginia trying to play the game now. So
well, and some of the guys and gals who drew these districts are now, of course, announcing their candidacy for those districts. They drew them for themselves and for their own victory. But I saw an initial poll that showed that that this is being rejected right now by Virginians by about 9 points. What is the plan for Republicans in Virginia to take to the air, get some television ads out there, and make sure that this referendum does not get passed, because I still believe Virginians, even if they lean blue, they're still fair people, and they recognize how incredibly unfair this is.
Well, Larry, you're exactly right. In 2020, 66% of Virginians, a supermajority, said we want a bipartisan redistricting commission, and that's what they got. The 6-5 delegation right now is a product of that, and they continue to say that. The polling shows the same. We've been working very hard to raise the resources to be able to get the message out there. When people know what this is about, they reject it. And, a lot of folks will say, hey, I see these advertisements on TV that say, oh, temporary. I said, well, first of all, a constitutional amendment is not temporary. Second of all, they go restore fairness. I said, no. Fairness is there. Fairness is there in what the redistricting commission did, the bipartisan redistricting commission. This actually eliminates fairness. So we're doing a number of things. We have some lawsuits in that are trying to take up the constitutionality issue in court. We're also out there raising money. We've had great response from people who are trying to get the dollars in the door. We also have had great engagement with the White House and the National Republican Congressional Committee, who will be devoting resources on this. But we have to get going because early voting starts March the 7th. Yeah. So this is the wolf at the doorstep. So I tell folks this is to borrow a Navy term, this is an all hands on deck call. So everybody has to be part of this because if not, if the other side continues to misrepresent this, which they are doing, then there is a potential that Virginians could go, well, that doesn't sound too bad, when it really is a partisan power grab, and it is gerrymandering, and Virginians have soundly rejected gerrymandering.
Yes. And hey, Congressman, in fact, point of personal privilege, I'm working on a project right now with one of your former comms professionals, Abby Schilling, and she's fantastic. But anywho, to today's topic, right. I'm so glad to hear you say that there is a coalition behind this. The resources are building. I also think we were just talking last hour about this horrific murder that happened at a bus stop in Fairfax County and what Abigail Spanberger is doing, or rather not doing, with handing over illegal criminal aliens to ICE. And how do you make that part of the message? Because doesn't it need, don't California or Virginia, but also these are the policies that come with more Democrats in office. I mean, really creating that picture for folks. Do you think that's an important part of this too?
Cassie, it absolutely is. Governor Spanberger, she ran as a former law enforcement officer, and she promised Virginians that she was going to keep communities safe. But what's the first thing she does when she gets into office? She says, no, state and local government law enforcement agencies are not going to cooperate with federal law enforcement agencies in their efforts to get criminals off the street and to for those that are here illegally and have criminal backgrounds are the effort to deport them. That's what she says she is not going to do. Mm-hmm. And we all know public safety works best when you have cooperation. I mean, the instances where people point to the problems, it's where the local and federal agencies choose not to cooperate, or state agencies choose not to cooperate. So, the tragic killing of Stephanie Minner, who was a 41-year-old Fredericksburg mother, that was stabbed to death at a Fairfax bus station, is a devastating reminder. I mean, we see that's what happens when dangerous individuals fall through the cracks and when there's not coordination between all the law enforcement agencies to get these violent criminals off the street. And in this instance, this, I believe, was preventable if the current situation was not what it is, and that is local law enforcement, state law enforcement not cooperating with federal law enforcement to get these criminals off the street.
Yeah, we want law enforcement to enforce the law. It's funny how that works, and politicians to get out of the way of that. Rob Wittman represents the 1st Congressional District in Virginia, and as it currently is constituted, Congressman Wittman, you represent a lot of Navy interests, a lot of military interests. You made a Navy reference earlier. I'd love for you to reflect on the military strikes in Iran. The Navy had a huge presence. Virginia had a huge presence in these military strikes. And I don't recall you claiming that Barack Obama's bombing of Libya was unconstitutional or required permission from Congress. What do you make of your colleagues who all of a sudden think that President Trump cannot use the military for an obvious threat? To suggest that Iran is not a threat to America is just being ignorant of history.
It's unbelievable, Larry. Listen, for 47 years, the Islamic regime there in Iran and its proxies around the Middle East have targeted Americans, targeted service members and civilians from Beirut to Iraq to Syria, you name it. And all of a sudden to say, oh, no, we shouldn't take up the efforts to take that terrorist extremist regime out is just unbelievable.
Yeah.
And you know, the Constitution entrusts the commander-in-chief to defend the nation. Period. Pretty simple and straightforward. The constitutional authority is indeed there. And I think what we should take away from this is the president is doing his constitutional duty to protect this nation. And I am so proud of the brave men and women across our service branches that are doing an incredible job there in that region, making sure that we take out the threat from Iran and making sure we defend the interest of the nation. Anybody here, regardless of your political stripes, should look at what our brave men and women in uniform are doing there and be proud. And we ought to be singing their praises of the great work that's going on there. And, I mean, really incredible in the face of severe danger. And, listen, we too, need to keep the 6 service members that perished there and their families in our thoughts and prayers. The sacrifice that they've made for this nation is what makes our nation great. And their families, too, are suffering right now. We want to make sure that we remember them.
Amen. Congressman Rob Wittman, you are definitely being targeted by these Democrats. They do not want you in Congress. They don't want you representing the 1st District. That's why they're redistricting and gerrymandering it out of recognition, and you should take that as a badge of honor. But also please fight to keep your district intact and properly representing the people that you have proudly served for so many years. Thank you, Congressman.
Thanks so much, Larry. Thanks, Cassie.
It is 7:46. Cassie Smedile. I do enjoy the restaurants in the District of Columbia, don't you? We've got
from time to time we make it back in. Yes,
great restaurants in D.C. And which should make one pause for a moment and wonder exactly about how cheap labor and illegal immigrants are being exploited by those extremely expensive restaurants. Look at this Washington Post headline, and I don't think it had the effect they were hoping for. 131 employees at 5 D.C. restaurants have left their jobs or been terminated after their establishments received letters from HSI claiming some employees appear unauthorized to work in the United States. And obviously they're trying to say, look at what they're doing, these poor restaurant workers, these poor restaurants. Hold on, pump the brakes. 131 illegal immigrants at just 5 restaurants? That's a scandal.
Right. Think of the math on that. Either we've got some luring center issues going on,
center, yes.
leering. I couldn't remember how quickly we forget. Yes, that math ain't mathin'. That's wild.
Yeah, I mean it is. Especially considering how expensive D.C. restaurants are.
Yes.
And all of the virtue signaling that you hear from restaurateurs like Jose Andres, who makes a buttload of money, and that is a technical term, a buttload of money on restaurants here, and they want to protect the workforce. Yeah, the workforce are all illegal immigrants who are exploited and getting, slave wages here to work in these restaurants. Why Jose Andres, I know he should win the Nobel Prize because he serves food to the Palestinians. Fine, whatever. How about you pay your employees and actually pay American citizens to work in your restaurants and stop exploiting illegal labor? Phenomenal. 7:54.